out, kid. You're getting paid what you got your last fight.
Conor McGregor made us rich.
I've spoken about Dustin's weirdly shaped head.
Who the is that guy? Who the is that?
Is there something about the phenomena of Conor McGregor that is unique?
Of those 20 strikes, he landed 19. Guys, you must understand how impressive that is.
At one point in his career, Conor McGregor struggled for pennies, but his obsession with being the greatest version of himself ended up bagging him a $600 million net worth, 2 UFC belts, a boxing showdown with Floyd Mayweather, and superstardom. The Notorious One story is unlike anyone we have seen in mixed martial arts, and one that we'll probably never witness again. So before he makes yet another walk towards the UFC's famed octagon, let's recap how an Irish plumber conquered the world.
The Notorious Conor McGregor.
Just over 10 years ago, Conor McGregor was working as a plumber to make ends meet. McGregor found his job miserable. He went to people's homes and fixed their leaking water pipes for 12 hours a day. He knew that this was not his destiny. He wanted to put his heart and soul into becoming a professional fighter because that was the only thing he believed he was good at. The early years were a real struggle, with McGregor swimming against the tides throughout. He was in a ton of debt and relied on welfare checks to get by, so he knew failure wasn't an option. At the age of 17, McGregor started training with John Kavanagh at SBG Ireland to improve his fighting skills.
My coach today, John Kavanagh, and found out that he had a proper gym. He also ran shows where you could actually compete properly. And that was it. The two of us went down and met John, and that was that. John showed us a different approach to combat sport, a different way of thinking.
And when he was good enough, he taught classes to earn extra money. The start was slow and steady, and McGregor made a few $100s in his first few fights. The Irish superstar fought 4 times in 2008, winning 3 fights and losing 1. In 2009, he didn't compete at all because he had virtually quit thinking he wasn't worth it. But his mother and coach backed him through the tough time and advised him to keep going, knowing that he had the potential to be the next big thing in the sport. Sometimes all you need is a little push, and that's what happened with the Dublin native.
The low, wide stance of Conor McGregor.
McGregor returned to action in 2010, fighting twice with a win and a loss at the hands of Todd Duffy at Cage Warriors, which motivated him to put his heart and soul into fighting and leave the rest at the hands of the MMA gods. In 2011, McGregor made a comeback for the ages, knocking out Hugh Brady in 1 round. McGregor's second start in Cage Warriors was exactly what he had wanted the first time he had entered the promotion. He went out there and cleaned the clock of Aaron Johnson in less than 4 minutes before stopping Stephen O'Keefe in 90 seconds in his featherweight debut.
Conor McGregor.
In the summer of 2012, Conor McGregor bagged a featherweight title shot against Dave Hill, whom the striking specialist put his submission skills on display that night, submitting his opponent with a rear naked choke to win his first ever MMA title. A few months later, he moved up a weight class to challenge Ivan Butchinger for the lightweight title in his hometown of Dublin, where he smashed his foe and stopped him in under 4 minutes to become a double champ.
McGregor is shot, but she is completely out of it. And now, a 2-division CWFC World Champion, the Notorious Conor McGregor.
By then, McGregor had established himself as one of the biggest stars in the UK, and Dana White was keeping a close eye as things unfolded. It was one of those rare moments where Dana didn't want to wait a fight or 2 before signing a fighter. He recognized McGregor's potential of superstardom, and he wanted to sign him right after their first meeting. That was the beginning of McGregor's UFC story. But as much as he was loved by Dana and company, he still wanted to win fights inside the octagon, which is exactly what he did.
The Notorious Conor McGregor!
McGregor's UFC debut came against Marcus Brummage in April 2013, where the Irishman put his high-level movement, angles, and particularly that devastating left hook on display by tagging him time and again until he couldn't move anymore. The fight lasted only 67 seconds, and since it was a spectacular performance, McGregor demanded some extra cash for setting the stage on fire. McGregor failed to secure a bonus in his second fight against the sturdy Max Holloway, but he still managed to beat him in a comfortable decision, and that too with a foot injury. In his third UFC fight, McGregor was back at doing what he does best, setting up fighters with trash talking.
Tomorrow take his head clean off. After head, every featherweight's head I'm coming for.
And then melting them inside the cage with his devastating left hook, which Diego Brandao couldn't handle. But even the Brazilian didn't see the worst of Conor McGregor up until that point. It was against Dustin Poirier that McGregor showed how far he could go to get inside his opponent's head and essentially put him out of the game even before stepping inside the cage.
I don't give a about rankings. As far as I'm concerned, I'm number one. And when Dustin's head clatters off that canvas.
In the lead up to their firefight, McGregor took a ton of venomous jabs at the young and impulsive Louisiana native. Dustin was furious and wanted to teach him a lesson. Unfortunately, McGregor had gotten so far into Poirier's head that he failed to think clearly. All he wanted to do was inflict pain on the Notorious one, but he ended up unconscious instead. Next up, McGregor took out the tough as nails Dennis Seaver.
Fighting out of Mannheim, Germany, Dennis Seaver!
And even he was not safe from the Irishman's verbal jabs and hooks. Seaver showed some degree of resilience, which still wasn't enough to stop the Runway Dublin Express. With 5 victories, 4 bonuses, and the entire nation of Ireland behind him, McGregor earned himself a shot against the King of Rio, Jose Aldo. But an injury to the champ forced him out. Although Mystic Mac thought he was running scared, Aldo's pullout forced the UFC to book an interim title fight against Chad Mendes, which was entertaining while it lasted.
And you hit the deck like a bitch.
Mendes caused a few problems to McGregor with his wrestling, but the Irishman still managed to clean his clock and win the belt, claiming that he was the real champion.
The new interim UFC!
McGregor was eventually booked to unify the featherweight titles with Jose Aldo, with the UFC setting up a world tour to build up the fight, forcing Aldo to face McGregor time and again in the press conferences. The Irishman was always going to have the upper hand because of his verbal fluency and his top-notch roasting skills.
But we are in a new time, so I'll whoop his ass in July.
Look into my eyes, little man. Little Brazilian.
And Aldo quietly absorbed all of it while having his belt snatched during a press conference. Aldo found himself in a pressure cooker situation where McGregor gradually upped the heat and tested the long reigning champion's resilience to the limit. Like Poirier, Aldo failed to keep McGregor out of his head. And just like Poirier, he wanted to put a wild beating on McGregor.
Eu vou bater muito na cara dele. Eu vou passar por cima dele igual uma carreta desgovernada.
And just like Poirier, he lost the plot and got knocked out in only 13 seconds.
Conor relaxed and smiling.
Just slapped him!
Is the new UFC featherweight champion of the world!
Unbelievable!
That night, McGregor turned into the biggest star in the sport, making it to the front page of newspapers and magazines around the world. He was breaking pay-per-view records and making a ton of money for the UFC, which is why his wishes were the promotion's command. Immediately after winning the featherweight title, McGregor wanted to move up in weight and fight then lightweight champion Rafael dos Anjos.
Yeah, it's red panty night when you signed to fight me, yeah? Back at home with your wife.
Normally, the UFC doesn't allow a champion to go for the second belt unless he or she has defended it a couple of times. But McGregor, he was different. He got his wish and was booked to face Rafael dos Anjos at UFC 196. Unfortunately, the Brazilian pulled out due to injury. Instead of sitting around and waiting for a rebooking, McGregor told Dana that he wanted to fight anyone they put in front of him. And that anyone was one of the baddest dudes on the planet, Nate Diaz.
It's Nick Diaz Army, motherfuckers.
The Stockton native was bruised and battered, yet he managed to stay in the fight and shock the world by submitting the Irishman in round 2.
That's it! He's got the shot! Nick Diaz! He's out! He has done it! It is all over!
Having suffered an embarrassing defeat at the hands of a heavy underdog, McGregor sought vengeance. He rematched Diaz at the same weight to prove that he doesn't run from a fight, and what a fight it was. The Irishman had a couple of excellent first 2 rounds, but Diaz made a comeback in rounds 3, 4, and 5. Both men gave fans a ton of entertainment, following which the Irishman was declared winner by a majority decision.
Notorious! Conor Mcgregor!
By then, Dos Anjos had lost his belt to Eddie Alvarez, who got his red panty night at UFC 205. One man in particular was not happy, and you might have guessed it, Khabib. He was the division's undefeated boogeyman at that point in time, and he thought he deserved to fight for the belt instead of McGregor. Yet the UFC gave the Irishman the title shot. Khabib's complaints were completely ignored, and McGregor and Alvarez took each other on, first in the press conferences and then inside the cage, where McGregor put on a striking clinic, stopping the champion in the second round to become the division's new king. That might have been McGregor's pinnacle in his UFC career, and that also might have been the last time the UFC saw him doing it for the love of the sport. With everything from money to fame at his disposal, McGregor's priorities seemed to shift as he started calling out boxing GOAT, Floyd Mayweather. Most UFC lightweight contenders, especially Khabib, didn't like McGregor chasing a boxing payday instead of defending his belt. But to many of the lightweight contenders' dismay, the UFC was fully backing its biggest superstar to conquer the world of boxing. With McGregor out of the equation, the UFC set up numerous interim title fights, some of which went as planned while others were called off due to tiramisu. But while the UFC lightweight division struggled for stability, McGregor finally got his boxing wish granted in August 2017 when he faced Money Mayweather in a clash of titans and superstars. The press conferences were fired up, with Dana White jumping in as well, and of course McGregor took a ton of jabs at his opponents. But unlike Aldo, Poirier, or Khabib, Mayweather couldn't care less because he had seen a ton of showmanship in his career. McGregor had a great start to the boxing fight as he tagged Mayweather a few times in the opening rounds. But once Mayweather found his range and his rhythm, he slowly started picking the Irishman apart, and in the 10th round he finished him with a TKO.
Since 2011, first stoppage. McGregor did not go down. He showed great heart.
Though McGregor lost the fight, he won more than $100 million that night. And at this point, he was a filthy rich man. Leaving the lightweight division in limbo, McGregor entered the world of entrepreneurship, partnering with a fashion designer to create the August McGregor clothing brand, establishing his own Proper 12 Irish whiskey, as well as purchasing a pub in his native Dublin to establish a net worth of more than $600 million. With so much money at his disposal, McGregor no longer needed to go to the gym and train for a fight. He was set for life, and realizing that, the UFC decided to strip him of his lightweight belt and booked a vacant title fight between Tony Ferguson and Khabib at UFC 223. It was the fight booking between two lightweight phenoms, and just like the 4 times in the past, the fight was once again called off after Ferguson suffered an injury after tripping on some wires. Khabib wanted to fight anyone, and the UFC's failed attempt at using Max Holloway as a last-minute replacement, they finally booked Khabib against A La Quinta. And during the media day, McGregor made an uninvited appearance. A few days prior to the press conference, Khabib had confronted Artem Lobov, Conor's former best friend and now fierce enemy, in the hotel lobby, slapping him and telling him to stop trash-talking Khabib and his team. Furious at Khabib, singling out his best friend, McGregor flew all the way from Dublin to New York in his private jet with a bunch of buddies to ambush the fighter bus carrying Khabib. The Eagle had a strong message for McGregor for the attack. It was a dark day in UFC history, or that is what Dana White initially said. A few months later, however, the UFC president proudly used the footage of McGregor's antics to announce a blockbuster lightweight matchup between McGregor and his arch rival, now champion, Khabib.
October, Las Vegas. It's on, ladies and gentlemen.
It was the first time since his Eddie Alvarez fight that McGregor was actually motivated to inflict pain on his opponent, since there was an ugly amount of animosity between the two. As expected, the press conferences were dark, with Conor dragging Khabib's family, his religion, and his controversial manager through the mud.
Ali Abdelaziz, mad terrorist snitch. I know a lot about you as well, you mad rat.
Khabib stayed quiet on the mic, but he did his talking inside the cage in what was the highest grossing event in UFC history. Khabib dominated the fight from start to finish, especially in round 2, where he punched Conor in the face a gazillion times while telling him to talk now.
Let's talk now.
In round 4, Khabib ended the Irishman's misery with a neck crank and flew over the cage to confront his teammate, Dylan Dennis, who had been talking a ton of crap. That kick-started one of the most entertaining brawls in UFC history, where punches and kicks came flying from everywhere. Both McGregor and Khabib faced suspensions and fines, and the story went on. Less than 2 years later, McGregor returned to the cage to face Donald Cerrone, knocking him out in only 37 seconds. Exactly a year later, nice guy Conor returned to lightweight to face Dustin Poirier in a lightweight title eliminator at UFC 257. Unlike the first fight, the build-up to the rematch had a different vibe. Conor was kind and respectful to his opponent. McGregor was nice, maybe he wanted to do damage control for the stuff he had been doing outside of the cage, like punching old men in his pub and facing legal issues and an assault allegations case. Or maybe he thought he didn't need to trash talk to sell his fights anymore. I don't know. Whatever it was, it didn't work inside the cage, since an older and wiser Dustin Poirier first chopped McGregor's legs down and then sent him to the shadow realm with a devastating flurry of punches. The two had a respectful interaction after the fight as well. But then, their relationship once again turned sour when Poirier accused McGregor of failing to go through his promise of sending $500,000 to his charity, the Good Fight Foundation, which he had promised. Poirier publicly called out McGregor for his alleged lies, making the Dublin native furious and rowdy once again. Needless to say, Conor was fired up before their third fight, and he was back at doing what he does best, taking jabs at his opponents.
This man is going to learn that if you disrespect a person's kindness and take it as a weakness, you must pay. Tomorrow night I'm going to make this man pay with his life, and I mean it. You're dead in that octagon tomorrow night.
Dustin and his lovers were prepared this time around. Inside the cage, Dustin once again won after a back-and-forth battle where McGregor lost by a doctor's stoppage after breaking his tibia seconds before the end of the first round. McGregor hasn't competed in the UFC octagon since then. He has put on a ton of weight and muscle, and some think he did so by juicing up, and if he is to fight in the UFC again, it will be at middleweight as things stand. Most recently, the Notorious one coached The Ultimate Fighter Season 31 opposite Michael Chandler, where his team lost most of their fights. But as much as it was an attempt to bring McGregor back into the spotlight, it was the UFC's attempt to set up a blockbuster fight against the former champ and the former Bellator lightweight champion. The fight was supposed to take place by the end of 2023, but since McGregor hadn't re-entered the testing pool, he wasn't eligible to fight without 6 months of mandatory testing. But that is a thing of the past now, because the UFC no longer works with USADA. Some say the promotion cut ties with the drug testing authority because it didn't give their biggest star an exemption. As things stand, McGregor is expected to fight Michael Chandler in the summer of 2024. Although it's all up in the air right now, but at 35 years old, there is only so much that he can do, especially when the next generation of MMA superstars is already taking over. McGregor has had a legendary career. He is the most popular fighter of all time and one who changed the game for everybody. And for that, he deserves a ton of respect. Where do you rank Conor McGregor in the MMA GOAT debate? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you liked the video, please subscribe to the channel. I cover all things MMA here and my jiu-jitsu journey. Hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.